Is it morning still? Just about? Not about? Just gone. Good afternoon, everybody. My name's Richard Collins and I represent an organisation called CSR A. The A is accreditation. We're the UK's only accreditation scheme for social responsibility. And actually we've been on a bit of a roller coaster ride in the last 18 months since we launched the scheme. The scheme goes back a little bit further. We also co-run the International CSR Excellence Awards, which we've been running for 8 years, and they're an international award scheme. My background's branding, and I've always started my talks by saying that branding has always been something that we talked about as being something that people say about you when you're not in the room. So this comes back to reputation, and actually I'm going to talk a little bit about the importance of reputation in the modern age. Just get this right. Right. So CSR, well, it is all about reputation. 88% of consumers said they are more likely to buy from a company that supports and engages in activities to improve society. So a good reputation improves consumer loyalty, end user loyalty, staff loyalty, and more importantly, referrals and enhanced brand visibility.
Richard, can we just, it might be, sorry.
Still on mute? I'll carry on. There you go. Can you, is that okay? And that's because I think we live in an age where things have changed. So we are more vulnerable. As businesses, our reputation is much more vulnerable. As things have moved over to the digital age, our online vulnerability is huge as well. And actually, we live in a world of Trustpilot and TripAdvisor, and an age where when people Google your business, they may not find your website. They may find something else that somebody else has said about you, which isn't actually accurate or complete, and they make decisions on you based on that information. And also you have that attitude, as I say, of the TripAdvisor culture that we live in, which affects the way people perceive your organisation. So not so long ago, a journalist called Ubar Butler ran a little bit of a cheeky campaign where he ended up having a garden shed voted as the second best restaurant in London. Now he did this because he was paid to put on reviews on TripAdvisor by a restaurant organisation. And he thought, this isn't right. You know, we're managing reputation based on other people. And actually, you know, TripAdvisor weren't aware of what was going on. So actually, when they got the data in, they didn't challenge the data, they just put it out there. And also in the age of online on influencers as well, there are stories of influencers who may stay in a hotel, may have a bad experience, and then talk to their 1 million or 4 million or 10 million online viewers about that experience and encourage them to go on to TripAdvisor and put a bad star rating against that hotel or that organisation. So in other words, we live in a very, very fragile world in terms of managing our reputation, both in the charitable sector and in the private sector. And something else that's happened, that's a recent development in the last 2 years, is the Blue Planet. The Blue Planet was almost a tipping point in which it started to change perceptions. It started to ask not just what can we do about plastics in the oceans, it really started to ask how can we be better? How can we be a better organisation? Because now consumers and different generations are starting to ask more about what we do and how we do it. Customers want to trust organisations they engage with. Employers want to work for value-driven employers, and investors want to know that a company is addressing its ethical responsibility. An interesting statistic, actually it's a little bit old now, it's 2015, although updated in 2018, was the Nelson Global Corporate Sustainability Report, indicated that globally, 66% of consumers are willing to spend more on a product if it comes from a sustainable brand. Now, millennials give even more showing, with 73% surveyed indicating a similar preference. But the most exciting statistic from my point of view is that 81% of millennials expect their favourite companies to make declarations of their CSR. In other words, publish their corporate social responsibility so that we can see what they're doing. CSR is becoming an increasingly important organisational strategy. And it has impact investment. CSR impact investment will deliver a sustainable profit for any organisation delivering on or promoting it on its CSR commitments and activities. So this will go a long way to redressing their online reputational damage or vulnerability. Positive narrative and positive storytelling can go a long way as well to kind of redressing that vulnerability that we have online. That's why we think that social media has become effectively the new water cooler, the place where we have our conversations, the place where we tell our stories. And what better place to tell stories about positive social responsibility impact? Because the recurrent theme through this talk is going to be around impact. Without impact, we don't have something to talk about. We don't have something to say. As I say, as it's been alluded to earlier on this morning, social responsibility is not a box-ticking exercise. It's something that has to deliver social value. And without measurement of social value, there is nothing to talk about. What I want to do is encourage businesses, charities, community projects alike to impact report on what they're doing and use that impact to talk to people on social media, to show leadership, to show that we are making a difference, because collectively we are making a difference. A fantastic little statistic that came out at this time last year was that in the 12 months previous, the national electricity bill had been reduced by 20%. I don't know how much it's been reduced in the last 12 months, but that was 20% nationally, because companies had transitioned to LED. Football stadiums, car showrooms, factories, 20% reduction of electricity in just 1 year, because businesses were doing something positive and saving money at the same time. So corporate social responsibility has become one of the standard business practices of our time. And for companies committed to CSR, it means kudos and the enhanced overall reputation, a powerful statement of what they stand for in an often cynical business world. And we've heard some of that cynicism this morning, and I'm hoping that I can readdress some of that. So it's about the establishment of a CSR strategy. This means having policies and procedures in place which integrate social, environmental and ethical human rights and human concerns into business operations and core strategy. So this is something that you can do that also talks not only to the consumers or to the businesses that you're working with, but also your internal audiences. For companies, the overall aim is to achieve a positive impact on society as a whole. Not so long ago, the European Commission defined CSR as the responsibility of enterprises for their impacts on society. And this is where things start to change a little bit. This is where our journey has reached a challenging point where we wanted to look at what CSR means. We want to define CSR for a new decade. CSR traditionally has its backgrounds in 1953 when an American economist coined it. And CSR has since then become an essential strategy for many organisations. It is a concept with many definitions and practices which represents the evidenced impacts of doing good, delivering purpose and having a positive impact on society. Something that we think all organisations should be part of. So as I've said, CSR is a very big thing. It's a little bit vague, it's a bit like a cloud, and we want to try and define a standard that we can all adhere to, and we can use that to report our impacts. We feel that it's time to redefine the scope of CSR by establishing a universal standard for social responsibility measured against the 4 pillars of environment, workplace, community and philanthropy. The purpose of which is to allow a like-for-like measurement and impact reporting for all organisations, whatever the size of sector. So, social responsibility, we think, should be for every organisation. It is a question of challenging the C, and by changing its definition depending upon the intended audience. The C needs to be more inclusive. It needs to include more than just the corporates. And to that end, we have established C as a wider meaning. For large companies, it is corporate. For sole traders and SMEs, it's company. For local authorities, schools, and the public sector, it's community social responsibility. For the third sector, it's charitable social responsibility. For consumers, that means products and services. It's consumer social responsibility. For training, workshops and education, we talk about citizen social responsibility. And actually, I think where we will take this ultimately is collective social responsibility, something that we should all be involved with. We can then surround these meanings with a caring, cohesive approach common to the wider collective. And I think the reason this is important is because we can then measure the impact as a result of that collective social responsibility. And therefore, we can see what social value means. People talk so much about purpose and social value and all these other terms and things, but I think we need to make that definition have meaning and resonate in terms of the impacts that it has beyond that. And that's just a little chart there that shows you how the corporate, company, community and charitable sit at the top in terms of private, public and third sector. And below that we look at consumer, citizen and then the collective corporate social responsibility that we can all be part of. So I'm going to talk about some of the clear benefits around social responsibility. I'm going to have to try and remember to drop the C now because I'm so used to talking about corporate social responsibility, and our C change has something that we've only instigated in the last few months. But obviously better brand recognition, something I've touched on already. But also positive business reputation. Companies often favour suppliers who have responsible policies, since this can reflect on how their customers will see them. Some customers don't just prefer to deal with responsive companies, they insist on it. So this is very much a supply chain thing. It's not just about the big organisations at the end, it's about the organisations that support those organisations, the engineering companies, the factories, the suppliers. A corporation's public image is at the mercy of its social responsibility programmes. Remember, consumers feel good shopping at institutions that help the community. So clean up your public image and broadcast it to the world. Make it part of your story. It's also about customer engagement. Using CSR can help you engage with your customers in new ways, since the message is about something good. It can often be an easier way to talk to your customers. If a customer likes the company, he or she will buy more products or services and will be less willing to change to another brand. Also, businesses can improve their public image by supporting charities and community projects. Volunteering, in-kind donations, pro bono, building strong partnerships. By publicising their efforts, companies increase their chances of becoming favourable in the eyes of the consumer and the customer. And also increased media coverage. The better the CSR benefits and impacts, the better the media coverage. And I think this comes back to the idea of impact reporting. If an organisation is delivering some output for a charity, we would like that charity to deliver the impact report and give it back to that business or organisation. That business and organisation can then share that information through their social media channels, and therefore the charity will hopefully benefit from that free marketing and PR activity. Not only that, the charity may even share that further to a different audience. A lovely case study is the Post Office, who recently used, and I'll touches on this in a minute, but used charitable support of Mind UK to engage their workforce, 1,800 people. And at the end of the first year, that workforce had delivered an incredible amount of effort to support Mind UK in volunteering time, in sponsorship, in giving. But also Mind UK helped the Post Office by improving its mental health and wellbeing policies. And at the end of that first year, an internal survey showed that the Post Office had improved mental health and wellbeing. Excitingly, at the end of last year, the second year of engagement with Mind UK, the Post Office published a £2 million saving in reduced absenteeism due to improved mental health and wellbeing. So the question is, what a brilliant story. Who was helping who? Was the charity helping the Post Office, or was the Post Office helping the charity? In fact, I think there's an opportunity for both organisations to support each other. So CSR provides the opportunity to share positive stories online and through traditional media. And as I've said, it boosts employee engagement. It is so important to deliver a program within your business that you can bring your staff along with you, to engage them at every level. There are lovely case studies we have of a firm, a financial firm, who actually engaged with a local charity that looked after the environment and took their staff out as part of a team building and engagement day. So what they were doing there, they were kind of almost looking at all the pillars. They were engaging their staff, they were delivering team building, they were supporting a local charity, and they were supporting and helping improve the local environment. So create an inclusive programme of CSR activities that staff can engage and be proud of. It is important that the staff can go home in the evening and say, you know what, I'm really pleased that the company I'm working with is delivering social value, is actually helping and supporting the community that I work and live in, is helping to support charities that we care about. And it's very important that a business chooses engagement with programmes that mean something to that organisation, not just arbitrary charities or community giving. It's also the greater ability to attract talent and retain staff. Just recently, we've done some work with Bucks New University around recruitment, value-driven recruitment, on a national database of career trends for students leaving university. 5 years ago, the top jobs were finance and law. That survey was completed at the end of last year, and it indicated that across the country, the top jobs for students were now in the third sector and public sector. And the reasons are clear, because a new generation are looking for purpose and better social value in the work that they're doing. They'd rather take a job that was perhaps a little bit less paid, but actually delivered more value in terms of how they feel about the world that they live in. We're talking about a generation that is thinking differently about value to the generations above them. Nearly 60% of employees who are proud of their company's social responsibility are engaged at their jobs. So again, creating that engagement creates that better productivity in the workplace. Also, Bucks University indicated that over 70% of students actively look for organisations with a CSR policy before accepting a job offer or applying for a job. So in terms of recruitment, there's a clear message. There is a growing skills gap at the moment in this country, and companies are struggling to recruit. So it's very important for businesses to not only do the things they're doing, in other words, the stories, it's not about storytelling, it is about story doing, but actually to communicate that on their websites and through their social media channels to attract talent and retain the talent within their business and their organisation. And also, there's obvious things like operational cost savings. So we look at the environmental pillar, as I've said earlier, LED lights, cycle to work schemes, turning off computers in the evening. There's no end of things that an organisation can do to reduce its impact in terms of energy and waste management. Things like simple things like recycling paper and card can have a serious impact on reducing landfill tax. One organisation, a law firm, actually delivered a second monitor for all of their law team so that they didn't have to print out the paper to look at all the documentation that they were using to assess the work that they were doing. And in fact, the chief exec of that company said that in the first quarter, that company had saved a 4-figure sum in reduced paper costs and waste costs. So there are very clever things that organisations can do that can actually contribute to the bottom line, but also reduce impact on the world that we live in. And it's easier to gain capital. Investors are more likely to back a reputable business. Investors who are pouring money into companies want to know that their funds are being used properly. Not only does this mean that corporations must have sound business plans and budgets, but it also means that they should have a strong sense of corporate social responsibility. Investors care about corporate social responsibility, and so should companies. According to the London Stock Exchange, investors now routinely analyse information on CSR or ESG, which is environment, social and governance performance, alongside other financial and strategic information in order to gain a better understanding of companies' future prospects. 60% of assets managed for UK EU investors incorporate sustainable investment strategies. And this is the same for tendering.
1 in 3 local authorities now insist on evidence social responsibility activity before delivering tendering projects to those organisations. So if you're delivering something that's better than a company next to you, but you're not delivering on your CSR, you may not get that work because the CSR points may shift that other company beyond and above you. So tendering is becoming, and that tendering has now trickled into private sector as well. So just moving on briefly, there's also the forging of relationships as well. We're very, very keen that businesses and charities forge long-term, meaningful relationships that last years. So creating those networks in which organisations and a business is a one-off. It's not just about one-off giving. It's about sustaining a long-term relationship. So good CSR policies do drive corporate change. And what we've tried to do is establish the simple 4 pillars of environment, community, workplace and philanthropy. These are great areas that you can measure your activity against. Every organisation is already doing this. The thing is, we're not talking about it. And we can show the impact we're doing on each of these things. Anyone in this room can say, look at our business, what are we doing with regards to environment? You know, are we recycling? Are we doing cycle to work schemes? Are we turning the lights off at night? Do we have a robust waste management programme? And also in terms of community, what are we doing to support the community? Again, most organisations are doing this already, but they're not recording it, they're not measuring it, they're not benchmarking it, and they're not telling everybody else about it. And the same with workplace. The workplace is almost one of the most important pillars because the workplace is where we go to work. So it's about mental health and well-being. It's about mindfulness. It's about inclusivity. It's about gender equality. It's about so many things, about engagement. It's about creating a happy workforce. So looking after that workforce is very, very important. And everyone is doing this. Everybody is doing this in one way or another. It just needs to be talked about. And finally, philanthropy. Again, organisations are supporting charities. But we want that support to be something that is measured, something that delivers impact, something we can talk about, something we can create positive stories in a cynical world. So make sure you record and report your CSR successes against those 4 pillars. Use that as a simple matrix. Pull down, if you're a large company, talk to your HR manager, talk to your accounts department, talk to your facilities managers. Pull that information together and you will then develop a policy that you can use as a CSR strategy. Show the impact your CSR policy has made. We run an accreditation scheme. Now, accreditation scheme actually is a way of developing a policy. We have an independent assessment panel of 20 organisations in the third, private and public sector that will look at what you are doing. And if you can evidence what you are doing, you can then achieve either a gold, silver or bronze CSR accreditation mark, which is nationally recognised and endorsed by the Institute of Administrative Management and Bucks-New University. So, being better, becoming better, it's a great phrase. It's from Aristotle. It's a piece of language, a phrase that was used 3,500 years ago. And a couple of simple questions. Do you have an equal opportunities policy? Are you a good neighbour in the local community? Do you operate a responsible supply chain? Does your company implement a recycling policy? Do you support good causes and goodwill initiatives? If you're doing any of these things, then you're already delivering on your CSR commitments. We just want to hear about them. We want to help you tell that story and report it. Every successful CSR accreditation gets 3 years accreditation. We also deliver a certificate. We plant a tree in the name via the Green Earth Appeal, and we also give 5% of every application fee to our nominated charities. Customers want to trust organisations they engage with. Employees want to work for value-driven employers, and investors want to know that there's a company is addressing its ethical responsibility. So really, I just want you guys to go out there and think about, the structure that we're trying to establish. In other words, look at those 4 pillars and look at how you can report the impact against those pillars and how you can tell those positive stories. We actually think that it won't be long before social impact reporting becomes a legal requirement in the same way in the large organisations in terms of annual reports and accounts. We also think that this is going to be a game changer in terms of the fact that we have a millennial and the Generation Z coming along who are now pressuring organisations to do the right thing. So I actually think, as Mark Carney said last year, that if businesses cannot show sustainability, if they cannot show social responsibility, it's very likely they won't survive as businesses. This is something that businesses have to wake up and really think hard about. And I think it's going to be the way that the future is moving. So we do think there's a sea change coming. We think it's on its way, and we think that you guys should be part of that movement. And just to finish off on that moment as well, in terms of measurement, IIC have obviously developed a platform that helps you measure and record the information, the volunteering and the giving and so on and so forth. And this is such an important platform because it helps you deliver the evidence that's required to become an accredited business. And not only that, it's about being challenged. If you say you're doing things on your website, again, it's not just about box ticking, it's about being able to say, look, someone rings up and says, did you give that 50 hours of volunteering? We can say, yes, we have the evidence, and not only do we have the evidence, but we can show that it went on to deliver some significant impact. So it's so important to actually look for platforms and look for ways in which you can report and record what you're doing, and then use that evidence to impact report in the future. So that's everything I'd like to say today. Hopefully that's been of interest. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Time for a couple of questions. Here at the back, and then gentleman there.
How much does it cost?
To become an accredited company. So the original model was based on an SME model because, again, we were looking for that inclusivity. We know that the corporates already have the ability to do this. So the original, we set the bar at sole trader being £600 for a 3-year accreditation, small businesses being £1,100, medium businesses being £1,500, and large businesses of over 250 employees being £1,900. And then for corporates, we have to have a separate conversation because we get into the whole thing about multiple sites. It's no good the head office of John Lewis getting accredited and then saying that applies to everybody. It's about the impact you have at the community and where your office or your business is. So what we're trying to do is make sure that we can have a fair metric to apply for multiple sites, but essentially that's the SME model. We also provide accreditation for charities, and that's based on turnover, so it's a slightly different model, and we have just launched the end of last year, into primary and secondary schools. So another tiny thing about that is the education, getting people to think about this before they go into the workplace. So we're delivering learning plans against the 4 pillars for school councils and encouraging schools. So typically speaking, a primary school, it's £100 to become accredited. We would like a business to sponsor that accreditation, and we would like that to be embedded into the teaching ideals of that school. Ofsted already want it, so it's something we can do there.
My name is Colin Crooks. I run a social enterprise called Tree Shift, and it's an online buy where you're into long-term support of market community. And the thing that you said about long-term support struck a chord with me, because typically we get very short-term, one day here, one day there benefit from corporations and companies. And I want to know what you think. How can we change this culture to encourage people to take a much more long-term relationship with charitable organisations that genuinely supports the outcomes they're trying to achieve?
Well, I think it's, first of all, there is the idea of social networking, so building social or corporate networks. So as a charity, you might decide that you can say to local businesses, we'll facilitate a networking opportunity, you become a member of that, we'll do that on a month-to-month basis, and we'll create engagement like that. And we've seen some very successful examples of that. The Hospice of St Francis in Berkhamsted have 200 businesses as part of their corporate network, paying £40 a month at a base level up to £400 a month, depending on what size company they are. And the great thing they do is they get the companies to provide the premises for the networking. The thing is that those companies who engage in that programme, they all share one thing in common. They support the Hospice of St Francis. It makes networking really easy for them. But more importantly, as a charity or a community project, it's being able to say to a business, it's not what you can do for us, it's what we can do for you, because we can help you tell stories, not just today or this week, but next month and the month after and the month after and the month after. So it's about creating a relationship in which over the years you build that storytelling and you start to build that impact. It's very well having that £1,000 that went towards X, Y and Z, but if you find that actually was £1,000 this month and then 2 months later we gave some staff over to do some volunteering and 4 months later, as long as there was some sustained relationship building, it creates that positive storytelling that can go on into the future.
Thank you very much for that. Very quick.
there's another society in our country. So like what you just described there, the majority of that, yes, absolutely, brilliant. It goes to hospices, it goes to NHS, transport organisations, it goes to national mental health organisations like mine. And they will be there to support the employees within these employers. But there is another society in our country which is supported by smaller grassroots community, philanthropic individuals working in that sector that get nowhere near this agenda.
Well, I mean, that's where we get into community foundation networks. I mean, the citizen social responsibility was to help look at individuals as well and how they can communicate and be part of that journey. The trouble is with the old-fashioned term for CSR is it wasn't inclusive enough. And what we're just starting this journey now, which is why we refer to it as a sea change, is that we are starting to look at how individuals, and already we have individuals who have become accredited through the CSR accreditation scheme. So it is about creating inclusivity for individuals and helping them tell their story and actually, you know, be part of that community. And again, it's not just that, it's the smaller charities, it's the smaller the community projects. So the community foundation networks, you know, work exclusively with small community projects to help them, you know, in fact, help them engage with a local business or a bigger organisation like a college or a student, a university, to help them deliver what their output is. I mean, it is that the trouble is, and I think the big problem is visibility. Everyone's doing this. Everybody wants to do this. People are finding it difficult to know how to do it. We want to be the lighthouse. We want to try and shine light on how people can achieve this. And I think within 4 or 5 years, we're looking to become kind of almost a national household name in terms of what we're trying to achieve.